Hey guys, Eric Cedillo here. I'm here with an incredible guest today. Her name is Stephanie Drenka, and she's going to tell you a little bit about herself in just a couple of minutes. If you're watching this outside the city of Dallas, you may not be as informed about what's kind of going on down, specifically with respect to City Hall, what's going on downtown. There's been a movement, and actual some serious movement, I think, on behalf of the City Council to perhaps sell our City Hall and have it developed by some development downtown and do some other things. Of course, we got the K. Bailey Hutchinson Convention Center going up. They want to make purportedly a large district there in downtown. But a lot of people are really upset with what's happening in terms of the sale. And I think Stephanie, and we're going to get into this really deeply, the way in which they've kind of rolled this out is really problematic. So we're going to talk about that mainly in this discussion, maybe some talk about local politics and how those kind of play themselves out and get you at a point where you currently are. But before we do that, I'd really love to just let the folks know who you are and kind of what you what area or background you kind of come from.
Well, I am the co-founder and executive director of the Dallas Asian American Historical Society. So we were established in April of 2022, really in response to a lot of reports of rising anti-Asian hate incidents during COVID and following. And we've since opened a physical location. It's the Museum of Asian Texans, where we have our community archives. We have galleries with art and history exhibitions. That is my passion project. And then during the day, I also work for a legal advocacy organization in media relations, so the Texas Civil Rights Project. Okay.
And for people who may not recall or may not have experienced as much, there was an incredible rise in, I think, Asian hate, as you had mentioned, during COVID, because of perhaps where people were asserting where it had come from or how it began. Could you talk a little bit about that in terms of I don't think a whole lot of people may know, that rise kind of occurred.
Yeah, so at that time, I was the communications director for another nonprofit, Dallas Truth, Racial Healing and Transformation, and a lot of our work was focused around narrative change, so telling the history of race and racism in Dallas specifically. Okay. And during COVID, as people began reporting incidents of anti-Asian hate, verbal incidents, threats, violence, there was this conversation that it was really being attributed to the narrative about China flu or Kung flu, China virus, etc. And that culminated in a lot of violence, and specifically after the Atlanta area spa shootings, where women of Korean descent were targeted and murdered. There were panels both locally and nationally about the origins of anti-Asian violence and what we can do to prevent it. And because I was working for a racial equity organization and I was the only Asian American on staff, I was being invited to speak on a lot of these panels. And I would look around at the other panelists, and there would be, someone from the police department, someone from the Chamber of Commerce. And I was like, where's the scholars, where's the professors, the historians? And then I'm like, they're inviting me to speak on that. And so I realized that there weren't any Asian American studies courses offered at local universities. There were no professors who specialized in Asian American history. So I decided, okay, if I'm gonna be speaking on this, I need to know what I'm talking about. And I went through archives and tried to find more history about Asian Americans in North Texas. And there was so little documented, and it was astounding to me and troubling. And I looked at my friends at Dallas Mexican American Historical League and Remembering Black Dallas, and really realized that we needed our own institution to be able to do this in a sustainable way.
Right. And we had a conversation a few minutes ago, kind of talking about you and your kind of origin story. Whatever you kind of feel comfortable in sharing with us, I'd love to hear a little bit about that. I'm sure the people watching online would love to know a little bit more about how we kind of got to this point from you.
So just, introducing myself as Stephanie Drenka, I think some people are confused about my origin, and it's because I was adopted when I was 3 months old. I was born in South Korea and adopted by white parents who lived in Chicago. And so I grew up in Chicago, Georgia, and mostly South Lake, Texas, a predominantly white suburb. And growing up, I had no Asian American representation in my community, in my school, and then I would go home and I would be the only one even in my immediate family. And being in Texas as well, we don't have Asian American history taught in our textbooks, and Korean American history, and so that combined with the lack of my own origin story and knowledge about my family history has given me, it was a void for most of my life, and it drove a lot of my intellectual and academic curiosity. I minored in Asian American Studies at DePaul University, and I searched for my birth family for about 5 years after I graduated college, and was reunited with them, and finally got to learn, a lot more about why and when and who, and having those answers really solidified how much that knowledge about where you come from and your roots can be so empowering. And I want everyone in our community to have access to that.
Yeah. And do you speak Korean?
Just a little, enough to order food at a Korean restaurant.
Okay. And I would imagine that may have been difficult.
It's challenging. Yeah. We had an interpreter for our first meeting to get a lot of the initial questions out of the way, and then I have 2 older sisters that I didn't know about until I went back to Korea as an adult. And that sparked a lot of my search. And then I have a younger brother. My middle sister, the second eldest, speaks enough English, and to combine with the Spanish or the Korean that I know, we're able to have small conversations, and we use Google Translate, but we make it work.
Yeah, and again, we were having a conversation a little bit earlier about how you kind of felt in all of these areas, kind of you see yourself, and you at 3 months old, having white parents, I'm sure that may not have been as an eye opener for you until, I would imagine, at a later time when you started maybe, hey, there's a difference between my parents and the way I look. Did you recall ever having that sense of, hey, I might be a little bit different?
Well, it was pretty obvious kind of growing up. I don't remember a time where I didn't know that I was adopted. The challenge, I think, was that Asian Americans have so little representation in general.
Yeah.
And so I grew up without role models like in the media or in politics or in the community. And I had a lot of internalized racism because I also experienced interpersonal racism. People, kids that I went to school with calling me slurs, and at that point, I just wanted to fit in. I just wanted to be like everyone else, and that kind of internalizing that over the years, especially in those formative years of adolescence, really takes a toll on your confidence. And it was scary to me to venture out into the Asian American community as well, because I didn't speak the language. I didn't have the cultural traditions or the etiquette, and so I've always felt like an outsider in both spaces. Yeah,
well, as I was telling you earlier, I kind of felt the same way in a whole lot of ways. We've been here on one side of my family for, I think, 9 generations here in Texas, and from the Spanish colonization at the beginning to present in some of our areas, the long lines of what's happening. But being from Dallas, parents were from Dallas, grandparents from Dallas, and I'm a little bit older, we've been here for a very long time, and I've had those same feelings, even though we've been here forever. And for me, it's always created an unfortunately large chip on my shoulder in terms of where do we start gaining the acceptance, gaining the strength as a community, as a Latino community. So I would imagine just how difficult that could be for you, being in a situation where you don't have a group that you can kind of surround yourself with that can kind of get through this stuff together? Must have been really hard on you, kind of getting through all those, those points, going to school, going to high school, going to college, kind of figuring all those things out, finding your people. You think you ever kind of found your groove, your people, or did you have to kind of shift that?
Absolutely. It took a while, and I think those sort of isolating years in the beginning and the pain that I accumulated also helped develop this. I have a very strong sense of empathy, especially to people who feel like they don't belong, or to outsiders, or that their voices don't matter. And then when I went to college and started getting involved with Asian American student organizations, I ended up being the president of the Pan Asian American student group there, doing advocacy work. The history gave me the tools and the resources that I needed to channel and alchemize my pain into making a difference. And there are, specific examples of history in Asian American history and Korean history that have really galvanized me and kept me going in this work. And that power is what I try to then offer to the community here.
Yeah. And Stephanie, I think I kind of reached out to you to kind of get your perspective based on some of the things that you had put on social media, maybe some videos and some other things that you had put out with respect to saving our city hall. And if you could, just for the folks who may not be as up on it, even if you're from Dallas, kind of knowing what's going on, what's happening where we would need to save our city hall, what's happening right now?
So I would say in the last year, conversations have accelerated around the costs of repairing our current city hall, which I'll go into the backstory and the history of City Hall. But it sparked conversations about moving the city operations out of City Hall into a different building, leasing a new building, and then selling the building that our current City Hall is in and the land which we own to developers for redevelopment. I did not consider this a serious threat for a long time because the idea was so absurd to me.
Really?
Because our City Hall building was designed by the architect I.M. Pei. So I.M. Pei is a legend in not only American architecture, but globally. Right. So most people know I.M. Pei for his work on the Louvre Pyramid. He was also the architect who designed the JFK Presidential Library and so many significant buildings. And Dallas City Hall was his first municipal structure. It is a very important piece in his personal legacy and history, and the building itself is astounding. It's poured in place concrete. It was designed with every detail that he designed this building was with the people of Dallas in mind. Right. And he has been quoted saying that, the people of Dallas are strong, and he built the building to be strong in representation of that, and it's designed to stand the test of time. Right. So the idea of it being demolished or being in such disrepair that we would have to move would not have even crossed my mind. And then I started seeing the conversations and the false narratives that were being put out around it. And I saw the arguments that were happening on both sides, and what was missing from the conversation, and what I felt a unique responsibility in my role as the executive director of an Asian American historical preservation organization was for people to understand who I.M. Pei is and his significance to our city and to the Asian community globally. And our city, even talking about destroying one of his monuments is it's criminal, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think the city of Dallas has a very short memory for some of these things. When I was in San Antonio, and I think I told you this, went to law school in San Antonio, and then I practiced there for a couple of years, married, had the 2 kids. We come back to Dallas, and I moved into this an old an old mansion, probably was a mansion around the turn of the last century. And I was looking at it a little bit deeper. An attorney, personal injury attorney, had made it in the 80s. He had redone it to make it look like it did, historically. And so I started looking into it a little bit deeper, the history of it. He had passed away actually before I had moved in. But this was one of just 3 buildings that were left, the 3 mansions along Ross Avenue. Mm-hmm. Early turn of the century, Ross Avenue had a series of mansions. That's where the rich folks kind of lived. And one of them was the old Below mansion, the Arts District mansion. This one, and then the women's building that's a little bit further down Ross. Those were the only 3 that were still there. And the city was going to put the theater district there. And this was I guess late 90s, 2000, and they said, well, we're going to take this building. And I got with the owner. I was like, hey, we got to preserve this building. This is a big deal. Your husband put so much into this, and it had been owned by the first African American city councilman, judge. Just an incredible history, that it had. And we went down and we argued, and we were talking about designation and moving it, at least moving it someplace else, and it just went nowhere. And that was an incredibly frustrating, situation for me at the time. And I was like trying to get a practice off the ground, trying to make things happen. So I didn't really have, time to do these things. But we see this throughout the city of Dallas. It's a situation where we don't take, or recognize the import of some of the things that are just incredible stuff. When they haul out the Neely Bryant log cabin downtown. Well, what else we got? What else is being preserved? What else is being saved? So I don't think a lot of people, I remember vaguely when City Hall was being changed. And I remember, I think for the first time, because you don't really always think about these things until there's a possibility this might get knocked down.
Yeah, we take it for granted.
So all the memories kind of come back, and I think we had shared earlier about some of my hit points were like the 80s when they had the big party, the beach party, and they invited people over to come swim in the area. You remember that, Fern? You were around in the 80s. I remember just thinking, they're not going to let any blacks or Mexicans there, and that was my kind of first thought. There's like, no way I'm going to go do that. And then again, I shared with you that I remember being proud when it was on RoboCop, seeing it in the 80s. So I think for me, most recently, City Hall is indicative of the flag room. It's where we have all of our stuff. It's where we go out in front of the building and just kind of like levy protests against some things that are happening that are just totally unfair. Our marches, our mega marches usually end there in City Hall because it's such a wide space in terms of what we had back in the 90s and early 2000s. So for me, all these kind of memories come back, and then you start thinking, hey, this is a lot more important than we're kind of giving it credit for. How much do you think in your head you talked about an obligation for preservation because you're part of the historical savings group, and then IMPay being the architect behind it. How much of it do you think it was that kind of elicited your response versus maybe, hey, this is just totally unfair in terms of what's going on?
I think IMPay's connection to the building and my background is what shaped the things that I talked about, for example, when I went to advocate at City Council. But to me, that's not the core of why we need to save City Hall. And you spoke to it about, Dallas is ahistoric. We tend to, Dr. Michael Phillips, who wrote White Metropolis, calls Dallas a laboratory of forgetfulness. But I think that is almost too passive. I think we actively erase history, and the buildings are an example of that. Yeah. City Hall, to me, it's not just another building. And I think it's a litmus test for the future of our city and what the people allow to happen and what our city leadership gets away with. And like you said, City Hall is, for me, that is where I go to protest injustice. It's where I go to advocate for my community in front of the city council members who were elected to represent us and are supposed to listen to the people. And IMPay was the one who convinced the city at the time to purchase the land that the plaza is in the park, because he saw the changing landscape of Dallas, and he could see these skyscrapers being built, and he was sitting in those Goals for Dallas meetings, and he knew that developers were going to see this real estate as prime for development. He wanted to protect the people and make sure that they always had that space. Yeah. So he convinced the city, we bought it, we own that land, we own the building. It was probably one of the biggest investments into the people of Dallas. So that alone, city council and their, in the grand scheme of things, short term, city council members are making decisions that will impact generations.
Right.
This decision will outlive any of us. And so it is, I think, imperative that the people understand the gravity and have a chance to speak out before this decision is made.
Okay. I think we just, earlier again, we were kind of discussing this just in terms of the process. I think currently we're in a situation where city council voted like 9-5 to conduct a study, instead of just simply let's vote on whether or not we're going to tear it down and find some other place. Currently, what do you think the chances are, and people standing up, because there has been a really, I think, powerful groundswell of folks saying, wait a minute, what are y'all doing? Slow this down, let's kind of figure out what's happening. If you're not looking for it, though, you may not have seen it. There may be a lot of people like, what the heck's going on with City Hall? So if you could kind of tell us where the process is as we sit here on, I don't even know what today is, 27th of July in 2026. Where are we? You probably looked into kind of, how this works in terms of, can city council do this? Can they make a vote to sell it? Where are we in the process? And do you think there's a possibility of stopping this from happening?
Well, where we are in the process is that a majority of city council, including the mayor, have voted not to move forward with a repair plan for City Hall. Yeah. And instead that was an affirmative vote.
We're not going to...
Yeah. And so they've now voted to authorize the city manager, Kimberly Tolbert, to work with consultants to present 4 options of different buildings that we would move our City Hall operations into, and then also our 911 emergency operations. So that is the first step in abandoning and vacating City Hall, and then they can say, well, now it's available for sale.
Right.
And so there's several things that have concerned me about this process. And one is the fact that back in March 2025, the Dallas Historic Landmark Commission voted unanimously to designate City Hall as a historic landmark. And with that, once that's approved, and it takes a couple years, it would be nearly impossible for them to do what they're considering doing now. We found out recently that prior to that historic landmark commission decision, city manager Kimberly Tolbert was already having conversations with the Dallas Mavericks ownership about City Hall land possibly being an option for them to purchase and develop on. So that the lack of transparency around the timing of when these conversations happen is really alarming to me. And you'll see the timeline of, first, after that March 2025 time frame, I think in May of that year, the repairs were estimated like around 81 million. 81 million. I'm
sure somebody came out with a
and again, those are like over a long period of time, and there's certain things that need to be repaired now, and that's another thing too, is there are repairs that need to be made. I will give them that, but they have chosen not to maintain this building as they were supposed to, and deferred maintenance to the point where these repairs are now necessary. But that number didn't seem to garner the response that I think they were looking for. It wasn't shocking enough to be like, okay, we have to abandon and sell our City Hall. So then, a few months later, new numbers come out. Now we're looking at 300 million, et cetera. And the numbers just kept getting higher. all the while conversations about the Mavs leaving the American Airlines Center are accelerating, and now we've got the Mavs wanting City Hall property, and the repairs are now $1.2 billion, and this is, the only option we have. The process has been so secretive there's no more that I can say. I think we can speculate about who's being paid what or what they stand to benefit, but if there was not something nefarious going on behind the scenes, they would be open about it.
What do you think that is? What do you think, because we had a conversation, and I've been a little, upset with especially the vote and the lack of, conversation surrounding it. It's like, oh, this is best for us to do this and move out. I'm like, where'd that come from? And especially with some of the city council members that I've known, a few of them for years, and very surprised with the speed and the response, that after there was some blowback, there was a response from them. Like, what is that all about? I can see, being a city council person, and someone coming to me and saying, hey, look, this is best for the city because of X, Y, Z. And it's if we continue into the, with the city hall, it's going to be difficult, it's going to be this, all the talking points that they have, all the other stuff. But is there anything, explicit that you think, when you say nefarious, is there anything that you think is beyond the pale of kind of like politics and what's best for the city? Because you can always hide yourself and what's best for the city. Do you think there's anything out there that when you talk about nefarious, that is beyond that?
So my question, when they talk about like it being a once in a generation opportunity, my question is an opportunity for whom?
Right.
And the narrative that they've sort of disseminated, it seems to be resonating with like younger professionals. Like people my age are like, oh, we want this vibrant downtown, and City Hall standing in the way of it, and this is our chance to have like a really cool entertainment district, etc. Realistically, that's not going to happen in any time that these young professionals would be enjoying it. They're going to have like gotten married and be moved out to the suburbs with kids by then. So looking at who benefits now with this opportunity, it's the developers who own the land around City Hall, who've been waiting to develop that, and whoever purchases this land and builds whatever they have planned for it, Adelson's, for example, and then the developers and the landlords who could possibly house our city operations once we move. So when you think about what's best for the people of Dallas, we own City Hall. Repairs, yes, they're costly, but they're going back they're being reinvested into our property that we own, our asset. Once we move out of City Hall and we're renting from another building, we lose control over what we're paying indefinitely. So it is not to the benefit of the people of Dallas. Yeah. And then when you look even further at the specific developers, the Adelsons, for example, who would benefit, who want City Hall property to build, because they're lobbying for gambling. Right. They want to build a casino there, and it's, I think ideal to them because of its proximity to the convention center that we're, investing millions of dollars into. And when you look at the Adelsons' motivations and what they use their profits for, and it's political lobbying, and it's supporting candidates that are conservative and have policies that I believe are very harmful to a lot of our residents. And now we are talking about not having a space publicly to gather and advocate for ourselves at City Hall, because now, they're talking about moving into a different building that they've already voted against, guaranteeing that these new buildings would have a public space for 1,000 people to gather and advocate for themselves. So we're losing not just a building, but a really important symbol and resource for us as a people to speak out for our communities when we're facing really, really atrocious things at every level, at the federal, the state level. And so for me, the city is kind of our last protectorate.
Right.
And I'm looking at the city council members who represent immigrant communities, who represent the queer community, who represent women, who's all people whose rights and liberties are at stake. And they're looking at handing over our biggest public asset potentially to a developer who's going to fund policies and politicians that will put us even in more harm.
Yeah, I think again we were having something of a conversation in terms of you know, where this kind of spark for the fighting back against selling City Hall kind of comes from. For me, again, I don't think this is as huge a deal if we didn't have what's going on, you know, at the federal level going on. We know that our country is being sold to the highest bidder. We know there's truly a kleptocracy happening that is funneling billions into you know, ICE, into infrastructure that is going to be incredibly harmful to our communities for years to come. Yet, you know, we don't have enough money to feed our children or fund our education. Stuff that just makes absolute. We're going to spend billions of dollars on this, you know, Iranian war, and we don't have the money to do these other things like, you know, affordable health care for folks. It makes absolutely no sense. People are very piqued on that, and then to have this happen seemingly locally when you have some of the same billionaires who are part of, you know, what's going on in Washington, it happening here locally, it's first of all, it's scary, and then it becomes incredibly angering. So how much of that for you and for others who are kind of part of this push do you think that's part of, or it's part of that?
Yeah, I think it's a huge part of it. I think even people that don't have an attachment to the building itself can see the lack of transparency, and they see who is having undue influence on our elected officials, and then the rush to vote and to make this really impactful decision without fully hearing the voice of the people is, again, what's happening. We're losing due process across the board.
Right.
And so I do think that as more people are waking up and realizing, and they're seeing other examples of the mismanagement and you know, even the recent furloughs, people were upset with the libraries being closed for the day. And what I'm trying to tell people is that the central library across the street from City Hall, that's in the radius of the land that these developers want to redevelop. So this is, again, like I said, a test. How much will the people bear, and what can the city officials and the developers get away with before we push back?
Yeah. How much of this, and I know you're probably not a real political person, but how much of this could be fixed or changed according to kind of the structure that we have? We've got a 14-1 structure that allows, you know, city council to vote, and we've got a weak mayoral system, meaning the mayor just has a vote. He can do committee assignments and things of that nature, but it is our city manager that is the one that kind of runs the day-to-day. But, you know, that can be incredibly influenced by, you know, the business community. Certainly the city council votes are influenced by the business community. There's no getting around that fact. The developers who have, you know, of course, billions of dollars to lobby in any way they want, I guess. You know, we're gonna, you know, have our local newspaper print these ads. If you go, if you look at, if you AI some of this stuff, or, which I was doing kind of in prep for this, you know, just the slant that you even see from that in terms of, oh my God, it's going to cost us, you know, millions and millions of dollars to do this, you know, based on the question that you ask, you kind of get, you know, where this is headed and where it's, you know, where it's kind of coming from. But if you could speak to a little bit about maybe, because you've had an opportunity to speak, you know, before City Council, you've had an opportunity to speak in other public areas about this. The folks who are kind of supporting saving City Hall, What does that look like in terms of the numbers? Are people even knowledgeable enough about it? And can we do anything to stop this from happening?
Yeah. People are waking up.
Okay.
I think I've been so heartwarmed, especially by younger folks, because it's being spun as the only people who care about this are like old, rich, white people. And
you're not old, rich, or
no.
white? Well, I don't know about the rich.
No, I'm not. I work in nonprofit, and so I think the more that the younger generation learns about the history behind this building and how much of an asset it is to us. And they have resources that other generations don't in terms of access to information. So they know what is happening on a national level and the efforts to, quell freedom of expression and to take away our rights. And so they see, I think, as I do, that this is a really clear example of one thing that we can fight for locally and make a big impact. So I was at a town hall the other day, and I just asked everyone, how many of you have been to City Hall? Everyone raised their hand. I asked, how many of you know, who designed our City Hall? And everyone said I.M. Pei. And that's as an Asian American, that is something that I never anticipated. But because City Council has made this false assumption that people won't care. Now people are waking up and thinking, I need to learn more about what's going on. Unfortunately, what I'm seeing now is that City Council feels that they have no accountability and can make these decisions and vote on these. My hope is that the litigation and the mistakes that they've made along the way, because they've been in this rushed process, will save City Hall at least long enough for us to have City Council members with the moral courage to say no to the interests of these developers that are against the will of the people. Yeah.
We talked a little bit about the study. They voted to have a study done to do their theoretical due diligence in terms of whether or not it's feasible to move out and where to move out to, things of that nature. They've hired, I think they've allotted $3 million to kind of make this happen. You got these furloughs happening and all this other stuff. We got $3 million to dedicate towards that. But the organization or the company that they've hired to do that, CBRE, one of the largest, or if not the largest, residential and commercial real estate firms in the country, the guys who would certainly benefit the relationship between the city of Dallas, CBRE, and then a whole lot of our other entities, large entities across DFW. People don't know about it, but CBRE is huge with respect to that. But they're the ones who are going to come back to City Council or Kim Tolbert and advise.
And for me, that was the amount is unreasonable anyway, $3 million for a study, but specifically because they already know the buildings that they're considering before this $3 million study. And I know this because of the amendments that were proposed and voted down. So Kara Mendelson, before this vote was made, proposed amendments to ensure that any building that they explore are presented be newer than our current City Hall, because that was the question too. A lot of people were like, this building's 50 years old, it's too old. But no, they voted against making sure that any new building would be newer than our current City Hall. She proposed an amendment to ensure that any new property would have the public park or plaza for 1,000 people. They voted against that. They voted against it being safer, or at least as safe as our current City Hall, and they voted against that. So their choices were so against the interests of the people and clear. And she also proposed an amendment for them to look at properties that the city also already owned to save us money. So in my mind, this says they already knew the buildings that they were considering, and none of those buildings had those qualities or attributes. And those are things that are important to the people. And so they voted consistently against the people, on top of voting to spend millions of dollars on it.
All right. We know at the federal level, congressional, Congress people and senators are usually, when they introduce legislation, it's a lobbying group that has created that legislation for them. I have any insight or knowledge of this, but it seems as though some of the folks who are doing some of the, you talk about the amendments and other things, they've been kind of coached into telling them, what we need to do, what this looks like after the fact, what the progression looks like. This has happened in the city of Dallas, for forever. We were talking earlier, when they had the TIF for the arena that they were going to build. Here comes the arena, and we're going to take this TIF all the way into West Dallas, and then you see what the city does to. We're going to go after these terrible landlords and all these other things. And not taking into consideration the displacement of people, the displacement of tenants, all of the things that always happen, the creation of Fair Park. We're going to displace all of these folks in the surrounding area, almost always in areas where they're the most vulnerable, the people who won't fight back. We're not going to have a dadgum, any kind of arena in Highland Park or the University Park. It's just a situation where they pick on the people who can't speak out for themselves. So what you're doing, I think, is incredibly important, kind of eyeing and at the very least allowing people to see what's going on. Who's at fault for this, in your opinion? Where is it the decision makers? Is it a combination of the folks who are going to make billions on this? What do you think that's all about?
I think there's a lot of people at fault, and again, it's the people that stand to benefit financially from this, but the people that I hold accountable most and who are the drivers behind this timeline and the ultimate decision makers are our current city council and mayor, including the mayor. And I think we all expect, billionaire developers to do what's in their best economic interest, but we hope that the leaders that we chose to represent us do that and vote and make decisions in our interest and not for personal gain. And looking at the people that they're supposed to represent who will be harmed by this decision. And it's not just the people that are living today, it's generations to come. This is a decision. I am paid died. He's not gonna, this isn't the whale wall where the painter could maybe paint a new mural. Like, we will lose our most valuable public asset, and it's not just us, it's future generations. And it, to me, shows the lack of conscience that our current leaders have. And if they make this decision, it for me shows that they don't have the credibility and the moral courage, as I said earlier, to make any decis for us.
And honestly, I think it's a little bit, maybe even deeper than the actual votes. You get a 9-to-5 vote. Over the last few years, I've just seen this, incredibly disheartening to see, Democrats at certain levels of government, them figuring out, okay, this bill is going to pass. We know it's going to pass with Republican support. If I come out as a Democrat, it's going to hurt me more than anybody else. So I'm going to go ahead and vote for it. And then you guys, since it's going to pass anyway, you line up on the other side so it doesn't, or it does get done. That has been the most disheartening thing, to see some of these votes happening. The playing of politics instead of maintaining the integrity of what and who you are in terms of a vote has been incredibly depressing, especially among some that I thought were different. And I'm unfortunately kind of seeing that on city council, which, again, being in the city of Dallas and growing up here over the last, since 2006, things changed. We flipped, the way in which how we vote generally, and we've become more progressive. Not where some would want to be, but more progressive. To see us seemingly going back, returning to an era where we truly are kind of run by the billionaires in this city is disheartening. Anything you want to share about, I don't know if we want to get into particular council people.
One thing I'll say is I've been shocked by the way that I've respected Kara Mendelson's process through this, because her and I do not align politically on several things. But when it comes to this, like, I've been in awe of the way that she has stood up for the people. I think why it's so unexpected to me is because now I'm also looking at representatives who represent immigrant communities. And we are spending millions of dollars on flock cameras and cowering to Governor Abbott's threats to withhold funding if we don't cooperate with ICE, and things that are harming our communities at such a dangerous level, and they're sitting back and being okay with this.
Yeah.
Again, I feel so like our vulnerable communities are left more vulnerable because the people we elected to protect us and stand up for us and prevent these things from happening are opening the door willingly and rolling out the red carpet for people that want to continue, seeing immigration enforcement and persecution and oppression.
Yeah. And just one thing to kind of, again, digging deep and kind of figuring out, 2 or 3 council members filed a TRO to stop a vote that was going to happen. But seeing what happens over time, the votes over time, is what's important. Seeing people who are the most vocal in terms of fighting back.
Well, look at the viaducts votes. That was another example of how are they voting for this?
That was a microcosm of where we're headed.
But it shouldn't surprise me because that is how Dallas has treated communities of color and neighborhoods historically. Even we're seeing history repeat itself. I think, what happened with Freedman Cemetery with the highways being built over it. I saw something now where they were maybe sending people to look at Pioneer Plaza Cemetery because that's in the convention center land. Like we're doing the same things that we were supposed to learn from.
Yeah. Once the grandchildren of those people move on, the business community says, okay, we can do this now. And we see it. And they're going to try to get away with whatever they can kind of get away with, and they'll take it in steps. Well, we're going to meet problems here. We're going to have, blowback here. But just wait. Time is on our side. We'll make this happen.
American Airlines Center. What's going to happen to Victory Park after the Mavs leave? But look at what was there before, and Little Mexico, and Pike Park is the last standing bastion of Little Mexico. And we did that. We sacrificed Little Mexico and those families and communities for, the promise of this sports arena that is now who knows what's going to happen to it after the Mavs and the Stars leave. Yeah. We never put people over development. And it's always development that benefits the people in power they should already have plenty. Yeah. Like how much more will they take from us before it's enough?
Yeah. And the unfortunate part of that is they know that not enough people will stand up, won't talk about it enough. They attribute apathy when in reality people are trying to survive. If we keep them at that survival level, then they'll never speak out or speak up. And the numbers that need to be there.
And they're taking advantage of the chilling effect now with people that are afraid of immigration enforcement, that are staying home and that are afraid, or even people with citizenship or with DACA status, for example, are being detained because of the things that they've said online or their criticism of the administration and policy. So the city officials know that there has been this chilling effect, and they're rushing to get things done in this really crucial, critical political climate. But I believe it will be their undoing, because I think they underestimate the power of the people and the speed at which we can disseminate information with social media.
Right. And that's changed. And I absolutely agree with you in terms of the young people. Young people are the ones who make change historically. That's where we see it in the civil rights movements and all of the movements that have made sense and have changed the trajectory of our country. It's the young people. But they've got to realize it. They've got to understand their power. And many times, just like you said, they're disenfranchised intentionally. They're put in fearful spots where they can't speak out. I'll be honest with you, some of the things that I see video-wise, when I see young people just standing up and standing out, incredibly important, incredibly heartening to see those things and to have them truly understand where they are. And then for them to get labeled as troublemakers, they should wear that as a badge of honor to ensure that our country is what it's supposed to be, which is a true democracy. Stephanie, I think, again, it's something that we, of course, don't have a crystal ball here in terms of where we see these things headed. I have, unfortunately, I think, become a little bit more pessimistic about how things roll, and when large amounts of money are kind of involved, the possibility of concessions exist. When I first got back to Dallas, we were losing one of our churches, one of our schools, St. Anne's, and the Catholic diocese was selling it to pay for some of the Rudy Cost monies that the verdict had returned. Understandable, they needed monies to pay for what they had done, which is understandable. But to take that part of it, that was truly the heart of Little Mexico, and that was what began the crumble in a lot of ways. So me and my sister and a few others kind of, how do we save St. Anne's? And the concession, unfortunately, after all of the litigation, the fighting and things that we tried to do, we were left with a plaque and some other stuff that was kind of sitting, still there. I don't know how long it's going to be there, but that's kind of the vestige of that kind of concession or that appeasement in some way. What I am concerned about is that we're going to get a big plaque, and this is where City Hall stood for a long time, or like with when they sold DISD headquarters or part of their headquarters on Ross. We're gonna call it this, or we're gonna call it that. What is that gonna look like? For me, for City Hall, being that meeting place, being that place where we can talk and protest and say things. As you had mentioned, the amendments that would kind of preclude a building that would be effective in some way. What might be something that could be accommodating? If they truly just want this to develop and build a big business district, most likely gonna happen, hate to say that, and I'm not conceding it, but it may happen, especially with the current votes, what City Council's doing. But what could be something that would allay, or at least maybe at least fix it a little bit in terms of your mind, in terms of the things that we're losing as far as City Hall? I know it's an incredible
I don't accept losing City Hall as an option.
Not an option.
I think if the developers can't find a way to revitalize downtown and use the other land around the land that we own as a people, that is a lack of innovation. And why would we entrust our money to them if they can't find a solution?
So how do we stop them? How does it get stopped?
It stops because they've made terrible decisions in deferring maintenance and misleading the people, that I think litigation can stave off the immediacy that they're trying to push this through. And the way that we stop it is people understanding what's at stake, caring enough to spread the word, and to make sure that in the next cycle we have people who actually represent us sitting around the horseshoe before these decisions are made.
I think some lawyers kind of got together in the SAVE, and they're kind of looking at some of the things that might be done to stop, at least temporarily, what's going on until support can kind of be garnered. Do you know anything in particular that might be effective, that have been violated perhaps, that could lead to that possibility of stopping this?
I think what's interesting is they've been really vocal about what needs repair and like showing pictures and stuff, but actually that just proves that they've neglected to make those repairs intentionally. They had ARPA funds that were earmarked for some of these repairs that they chose not to use, and that could be detrimental to them, considering that City Hall is under consideration for a landmark designation, because then it's demolition by, I don't know the phrase. We might have to scrape that.
That's okay. When you demolish a historical landmark, the heightened scrutiny behind it.
I think it's demolition by neglect is the phrase, but it's the crux of the current litigation.
Okay.
So I think they could have. I think that could possibly at least save it long enough. My fear is that, like you said, the money drives our city, and we've seen that historically. And so in that case, at the absolute worst case scenario where we lose this building and it becomes just a plaque, I hope that it is the galvanizing moment in the city of Dallas history where the people stop closing their eyes and letting these wealthy billionaires influence our lives. And I don't think I can forgive myself if I do anything less than everything I can to protect the building. But I've told myself if I can't save City Hall, I will avenge it.
How so?
I will make sure that history knows what we lost, who was responsible for it, and make sure that that legacy of destruction and corruption follows them in whatever career move they choose next.
All right. Well, Stephanie, I really appreciate the conversation, and I appreciate what you're doing. Like I said, I think we had a shared, feelings of kind of being on the periphery in a whole lot of situations. Maybe for me, at least how I feel, certainly not as much as I felt when I was a kid, kind of growing up and growing through it, and being afraid to kind of speak up in a lot of ways. And then, eventually for me, becoming a lawyer and being able to do that and speak on behalf of other people has kind of empowered me, and kind of gets you past that. I'm not going to worry about the ramifications. If it's the right thing to do, it's the right thing to do. And I just hear that in you, and I hear it in what it is you're trying to make happen, and the passion that you have for it. Just wanted to let you know that people recognize it, and certainly I recognize it. So keep doing what you're doing. We appreciate it. And who knows? There's a very real possibility that if we can get enough people seeing this, standing up and standing against, that we can in fact save our City Hall. So once again, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you.
Absolutely.